So they are authentic. Take a look at them later if you would like. I think you'll be surprised by the weight of the rifle. It's heavier than I think most people would think. All right, Gettysburg. How many people are familiar where Gettysburg is? Pennsylvania. All right, most of us. Very good. The Battle of Gettysburg began after the Battle of Chancellorsville. Chancellorsville was ended on May 3, 1863. In that time, Hooker, who had the Army of the Potomac, he had an army of 120,000 men against a Confederate army of 60,000. They're approximate. And he was defeated. In other words, on the field of battle, he was pushed off the battlefield into what they call the wilderness area, woods area. The one loss that the South had was losing Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson was the best general of the Confederacy, and his own men shot him after that battle as he was coming back from doing some reconnaissance. So he was shot in the arm. He died almost a month later, but that was a great loss to the South. So they won the battle, but they really lost that general. So that was May 3. Roy, why don't you hit the next one? So we have two different generals. We have George Gordon Meade, and the next one is Robert E. Lee. We're familiar with that. Robert E. Lee was the Southern general. He was there since the beginning of the war. Meade, 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg, became the general and head of the Army of the Potomac. So he didn't have much time to plan. At this time, Hooker then was basically put out of the Army. He was put into the Western Theater of Operations. He was out of the Eastern Theater, the Army of the Potomac, and kind of shipped out. They found out he wasn't too good of a general, so they moved him away. So we begin then with the campaign. So it started, well, let me backtrack. From May to the beginning of June, Lee restructured his army. He had, because of Jackson passing away, he had to get a new general, and he restructured the whole thing. So you had basically three main corps of Longstreet, Hill, and Richard Ewell. So he restructured that into the corps and made up his army, and at this time then the army was approximately 74,000, and the Army of the Potomac was about 94,000 at this time. So we have an overall campaign. If you have any questions, just holler. I'll try to answer where I can. So here's the campaign. Down here is Fredericksburg. Down here is Fredericksburg, Wilderness, Chancellorsville, all that began in this area down here. So he wanted to invade the North again. He did that the year before in 1862. He had a great victory, so he thought it would be well to push his idea of trying to get the North sick of the war, that they would sue for peace. So he said, I'm going to invade into the North. That would be into Maryland, in this area. This is West Virginia, and up into Pennsylvania. So they started about the beginning of June. And they just jumped off. On one side, you're going to always see that the Union Army is always in between Lee and Washington, D.C. If they reversed, the Confederates then would run into Washington, D.C. So that was a screening to keep Lee away from D.C. Remember, D.C. is in Virginia, surrounded by Virginia, so it makes an ideal situation basically for the South. So now you have the first battle in this campaign is Brandy Station. Brandy, right around in there, was mainly between the Confederate and the Northern Cavalry. Jeb Stuart was well known, went against the Northern Cavalry and fought to a standstill. That's the first time that happened. So it showed that the Northern Cavalry could stand up to the Southern Cavalry. And the cavalry is used mostly for screening, to screen. That was their eyes and ears of the armies. Next. Now, here we have an overview of Gettysburg. A lot of people think that Lee went there to get supplies. He did, but not out of Gettysburg, but through the surrounding area of Pennsylvania. That was the purpose. It wasn't just shoes, it was other things. The South was poor, they needed supplies. He invaded the North to get supplies. But Gettysburg was very important. Why? Because you have many roads that run into Gettysburg. All these roads, railroads, all that comes into Gettysburg. It shows you the importance of this little town. Now the area around Gettysburg is a lot of farms. Today, to this day, it's still farming. Around this area of Gettysburg, right around in here, today, a little bit south and in here, is apple orchards. It's rolling hills. Apple orchards are owned and run by a company named Mott's, and they have their factories there for the apples. It's beautiful country, rolling hills, trees, and very fertile. So at this time in the overview, we see that mostly the South, the Southern armies were north and west of Gettysburg. The Northern armies were still coming up from the south, from the east, and in this direction. Next slide, please. So this began early in the morning. Early in the morning of July 1, we have Heath really doing a reconnaissance within Gettysburg. He didn't think anybody would be there, but since they were on the outside, they wanted to see what was in Gettysburg to see what they could get for supplies. Well, they ran into Buford, who was there already, cavalry. He's the eyes and ears of the North. Therefore, he's out in front of the army. But Jeb Stuart, of course, isn't there. It should be Jeb Stuart who's trying to poke around, but Jeb Stuart had an idea to go around the whole army of the Potomac. So therefore, a division started poking around and see what they ran into Buford. Next slide. Now, Buford was spotting out the Southern armies from the west standing in this cupola. He was standing there looking west, watching the army of Virginia form up in an area called Chambersburg and west of Gettysburg. And Heath's division is starting to poke into there, putting skirmishers out, trying to figure out what's going on here. He ran into Buford. Now go back again if you would. So now you see that here, this is called McPherson's Ridge. Heath, with his division, is in the lower part. This is called Willoughby Run. And Buford is up, here's that seminary, here's his line. He's watching these men come in, and they start fighting. Now at this point, the South had approximately, let's see, 2,600 men coming out of there. And the North had about half of that. Let's see. Yeah, he had, no, I'm sorry, Buford had 2,700 men and the Confederates had 7,600 men. That's how many men are coming in here against 2,600. So he has skirmishers way out. They move back. They formed a line here on McPherson's Ridge. Next slide.
I have a question.
Yes.
From Buford to the line there,
Mm-hmm.
how many miles is that?
Oh, it's not miles. It's,
Feet?
yeah, I would say 2,000 feet,
Really?
3,000 feet. It's not quite a mile. If you ever go to Gettysburg, you can see all this here, and you can really establish lines where they are. But from where this is, maybe it's a half a mile away to where the fighting is going on and where the South is coming in. Now, there is terrain here. This is Seminary Ridge. I show you McPherson's Ridge. Ridges there are basically rolling hills. That's all it is. So you have a ridge that's up high, and then it rolls down and comes back up to the other one. Now, in this part of Gettysburg, this is on a high part of Gettysburg itself. All this is on a higher plane than the town kind of drops down to like a valley, and then it goes back up again until your hills. As we get into the battle, we'll see that. However, at this point, that's the highest point. This tree probably wasn't there, so he could see, you know, way out. That was the highest point where he could see. And he's looking out 2,000–3,000 feet. Here comes the South, and they're already fighting. Why do you think that the South could hold on with cavalry with 1/3 of the numbers against the South? The South came in, they were shooting an Enfield. Enfield is an English model of kind of with the Springfield, the same type of rifle, but they could shoot 2 times, 3 times at the most a minute. The North, the cavalry especially, had what they call Sharps breech-loading rifles. In other words, they could fire 10 to the South's 1. That's why they could hold them off. A breech loader, they open it up, it comes out the back, they take 1 cartridge, put it back in, shut it, shoot. Open it up, comes out, have another cartridge, put it in, that's how fast they could do it. Shut it, shoot. South couldn't do that. They had to load it up what they call muzzle loader. In goes the powder, in goes the ball, pack it down, put the cap on, shoot, lift it up, aim, shoot, start all over again. Whereas the North didn't have to do that with their cavalry. So therefore they could hold them off for a while. Now they're holding them off because now Buford scouted around this area and seen, hey, this is pretty good for fighting. If we have to fight, this has a lot of terrain that we have high hills where we can get to and keep the high ground. Terrain was very important in this Civil War. Next. This is McPherson's Ridge. This is his farm. This is the barn. That's still there yet. That's Civil War old. Inside that barn is still, after the battle, that was used for a hospital, and there's still sketches and writings in there from the Civil War veterans that were in that, used as a hospital. But here you can see the ridge. You see how it goes up here? So, in this part here, this is called Herbst Woods. The South is coming from this direction. They're coming rolling up. And this whole ridge back in here, that's where the North is. So that's kind of what it looks like today. Next, please. Around 10 a.m., here comes the divisions and the infantry of the North. The South is already here on Hers Ridge. They're fighting along Willoughby Run, McPherson's Ridge. This is called Seminary Ridge, as you can see, as I showed in the last picture how it was. Well, Reynolds comes up. He's here with his division. He has a very good division. He's against Archer, his brigade, Davis, and all that. Now these are Alabama, and then from Tennessee. These guys here are from Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Does anybody know what that was? That was an elite division. The division was called the Iron Brigade. It was called the Black Hat Fellows. They wore black hats. That was one of the best divisions within the Army of the Potomac, and they went against them here. Well, that guy didn't know that. They ran into him and they hit a brick wall. Whoa, what happened? So they moved back. They went in there and they moved back. They had to assess the whole situation. Now this general here, Reynolds, who's leading them on, at this point early in the fight around 10:30, was hit by a mini ball in the back of the ear and killed him. He was the highest ranking general on the field that was killed that day in the beginning. Another man took over that division. Anybody, or that corps, anybody know who his name was? Doubleday. Who's Doubleday known for? He's the founder of baseball. That same man. So now we see as more and more men come up, Davis Division pushes this one away, and now we're going to get into an area called, I'll go on to the next one. I'm sure what that is. All right, more troops are coming up, and we get into an area called the railroad cut. It's, if you're on the battlefield, you'll see it, and there's a lot of monuments there. Just to give you an idea, Gettysburg has about 1,500 to 1,700 monuments on the battlefield. It's big, it's well preserved. If you could ever get a chance to see it, it's something to see. But in this area, it's called an unfinished railway, or a railroad cut. Well, you can see that this Davis division that was here, he swung around and started pushing the Union out of the way, and his men went into this railroad cut and figured that was a good spot to have cover and start shooting at the Union here to try to get them, what we call the side, but it's their flank, to shoot them on a flank and try to roll them up. However, it was pretty deep, and they didn't know that. So Cutler now saw, hey, I have an opportunity. They're stuck in here, they can't get out. So now he pushed back into there, and he captured a whole lot of Confederates. And there was a big fight, and that's one of the stories that they have in Gettysburg. Next. Now this is a different type of map. You can see more of what's going on. Here's the unfinished railroad we were just talking about. That cut, all these men were coming up. Archer ran into the Iron Brigade, moved back, and kind of what we just talked about. And now Davis, he moved over, got into this railroad, got stuck, and now these guys came in to attack them next. Here's the railroad cut. So you can see how deep it was. They got into it, but the other part, they couldn't get out again, so they got captured. And that's why. You can see how steep the walls were. Now you see these monuments here? They line up this ridge, 30 of them, to show the first day of battle where these divisions and brigades and companies were. And they've been there for, I guess the 1870s, 1880s was when the first ones were put there in that battlefield. Next. Around 1230, we see more men coming in. The North is bringing up more men here, but they not near enough as what the North has. Now we have an Oak Hill area. Rhodes Corps comes in, or divisions, with their brigades. Early is back up in here. This is the bulk of the Southern Army, and they're coming in fast and furious. So the North is doing the best they can to hold on. More men are going out to bring up the Union from the south. They're maybe 15 miles away. Get up here, get up here. We got a big fight on our hands. So that's what's happening. So now you can see where more men are coming in. So around 1230, it's increasing. Now just be aware at this time, you know, Lee did not want to have an enormous battle here. He wanted to get supplies. He didn't want to go through a major battle. But it's turning out into one. There's more and more men coming. And Lee is still not on the field yet. Next.
Can I ask you,
yes,
at about this time, how many men have already been killed? Is there an estimate, like, per hour?
I don't have it per hour. I have it at the end of the day. I'll give you to that, but I don't have it per hour.
But they haven't broken it down to
yeah.
At that point. Okay.
They do, but this is a large battle. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm trying to give you an overview. Mm-hmm. I've read books, just particular regiments, you know, it gets tedious, to be honest with you, but I like it. It gets crazy, you know. So now we have, here's Heath's Corps, or division. Here comes Hill, Ewell, Early. Here's the bulk of the Confederate Army. The Northern Army isn't here yet. They got maybe 2 corps. They also have 5 corps. They only got 2 here. And they're getting outnumbered. And they're starting to tell. So this is Rhodes, Heath, and Early. All 3 of these corps attack almost simultaneously. And the bulk of the Union Army isn't here yet. This terrain right in here is high. This terrain here, this part right about in here drops off. If you go there, this is all high areas, and all of a sudden it drops off. And this is called the knoll, Bartle's Knoll. He pushed out from here, went into here. He had artillery, and he wanted to get after the artillery that was on this hill here, that the Confederates had. So he went onto this knoll. Well, he almost got surrounded. It was kind of a foolish move. He also got wounded pretty bad and was left on the battlefield to die. They were just going to pull him out of there, and they thought there's no way he's going to live, so they left him there. He did live. He was also called the Boy General. He was, I believe, 24 or 25 years old. Next. Well, now, of course, with all that, around 2:30, Lee got here and basically looked at it and said, well, we got good ground, let's keep fighting. So they did. So now you can see where they all were. Now they broke through around 4 o'clock. Well, all these men are starting to retreat. Where are they going to retreat? They went right through the town of Gettysburg, right through here. And they went streaming through there. Another corps that came up is Howard. He came up, saw the fighting, saw that the lines were breaking, put some of his men up into here, but he went on an area called Cemetery Hill. This here was called Culp's Hill. This is high ground. This is low ground. He started setting up a defense within these hills, knowing that that line was going to collapse. His line collapsed at the Battle of Chancellorsville. He wasn't about to do that again. So he kind of saw forward. He was a good general. However, he did have some faults. But this is not one of them. He was there prepared. Next. So that is the end of the first day battle. This went into 7 o'clock. The South tried to get into, they got through the town. They fought there for about 2 hours, going through the town. And the men are streaming through there. You got to figure there's thousands of men coming through here, going up into these hills. Howard's bringing them in there, get them up into Cemetery Hill, put them up in Culp's Hill. That's the high ground. And then as the South is coming in, they're running into this high ground on artillery. It's just mass chaos. Fighting in the town. Guys hiding in the cellars, scared. Just mass chaos. They fought until about 8 o'clock at night. Go on to the next one. So now we have an overview. This same overview is basically the same as what happened at the end of the day. You have your two hills, Culp's Hill. You have Cemetery Hill, and you have this Cemetery Ridge running right on down, and they're going to get anchored on a little round top. At the end of the day, this is what happened. They surrounded into Ewell, went into the Culp's Hill. We had A.P. Hill into the center, and Longstreet isn't here yet. He came at night. However, he went onto the southern part of the battlefield. So we have what they call a fishhook. If you see this line, it goes up, around, all the way down, like a fishhook. This is interior lines. This is outside lines. So in other words, when they had to move troops, Meade can move troops from here to here, nice and close. It wasn't close anywhere for the South. They were pretty well strung out. But Lee, Longstreet, Hill, and Ewell were very, very good generals, both in tactics. Now at the end of the first day, I'll just read you some statistics. After that general retreat and the whole line collapsed, we have how much casualties? That was asked. So just the first day of Gettysburg ranks 23rd in the biggest battle of the Civil War. This is the 3-day battle. That's how big Gettysburg is according to the rest of it. So the number of troops engaged, Meade's army 22,000 and 27,000 of Lee's army. The Union casualties were 9,000 and the Confederates were 6,000. 15,000 men, one day. Go on to the next one, please. Longstreet came onto the field at night. Oh, 8 o'clock at night. He wasn't there yet, but he came up with another corps. 2 corps fought the first day, and now the 3rd corps comes in. Go on to the next one. Okay, Lee had a plan. He said, we're on good ground. We have bloodied the North from the first day fighting. We're going to attack first in this area, Culp's Hill, and in this flank, in the round tops, and push them up, and that was his plan. That's what he wanted to do. So we have 3 corps. He wanted first the 2 flanks, see what happens. That kind of what he did. So you got to remember, during the night, more and more Union troops are coming up. 3 more corps came in, a lot more men. So they got strung out here, right on down, and anchored on a little round top. Next slide, please. All right, so here we have at the, go back again, the southern end of the line. Lee said we're going to start here with Longstreet and go after the southern flank of the Union Army. So he jumps off, but Longstreet got here late. He was still in this area yet. On the second day, he had to march from this area all the way down to here so he could fight into this round top, little round, and he got lost. He had to backtrack. They didn't get to it until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They wasted a whole day. Go on to the next one. So the jump off was Hood, Texas divisions, jumped off finally around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They fought to the... Now, in the meantime, go back again, I'm sorry. In the meantime, well, it doesn't show it here, so maybe. Well, this line, if you can see this line, is supposed to be onto the round top. And Sickles, a general, took his whole corps and moved off the round top into this area called Peach Orchard. And made a salient. So actually, instead of the line being anchored in here, he came down, went around this, and came back a little bit here, which was foolish, because now this high ground he lost. He thought he was on better ground here, and here comes Longstreet down here, ready to attack him. Go ahead. So here they are. They jump off. Here sits the men in the Peach Orchard. Instead of down in here, they're over here. Now they can come around this corner. There's nobody here. They get into this area called Devil's Den. Much fighting went along here. This whole area is very famous. This is Peach Orchard. There's the wheat field, Rosewoods, Devil's Den, Little Round Top, Willoughby Run. All this was much fighting during the second day. There's many monuments there. It's really neat to see. Go on to the next one. That Devil's Den, a bunch of rocks. But they could hide men in there. They could hide sharpshooters and all that type of thing. Go on to the next one. This is what it looks like standing on top of the round top looking out. So, these woods back here, that's where the Confederate Army was. They jumped off from that point. They came across these fields. Some of the Union Army was here that Sickles put them. Instead of putting them up here where we're high, you can see you're high, he's down here and he went out this way. So now you got the whole Confederate corps coming in of Longstreet. And here they come. Go on to the next one. And that's another picture. Now you can see here, there's some monuments. It's really kind of neat to see because it's well preserved. Go ahead. Now this is the Round Tops in 1909. This is Big Round Top, Little Round Top. That's where Sickles should have been, but he wasn't there. Go ahead. So what happens? Sickles is up here where I showed you. Hood started pushing and got onto Round Top. He got into Devil's Den and pushed out the 4th Maine. And they kept that through the rest of the battle. They never got pushed out of there again. They went back and forth, but eventually he locked himself in there and stayed there. On Houck's Ridge, they were there for a little while because the fighting was still going on in Peach Orchard, through the wheat field, Houck's Ridge, and Little Round Top basically was unoccupied. There was a general called Governor Warren who got on top of there, and as the fighting is going on, he looked, he says, there's nobody here. Sickles is way out in the Peach Orchard. He went crazy to get men up because he sees Hood coming in. Here he is on Round Top. Here he is in Devil's Den. And they're starting to come up Little Round Top. He found men of the 5th Corps on this part coming up. That was Sykes. And he came in and finally got them up here. As the men were coming up this hill, he finally put some of these men up in here. You got Maine, New York, Pennsylvania, and the 20th Maine. Everyone heard of the story of the 20th Maine. That was the southern end, or the left flank of the Union Army. That was it. If the South got around there, they're going to roll up the whole army. That was very important. Go on to the next one. So here's the battle. They went from Round Top, and they got into, now this 5th Corps is up in here and anchored by the 20th Maine. Joshua Chamberlain was told to hold that line at all costs. If that goes, the whole Union line is going to go from the south, and it's going to roll them right on up. Then we're in trouble. Then they're going to have high ground. They have Round Top already. If they take Little Round Top, now they're going to get on behind us because we have a corps out here, and they're going to run it all the way up this way. Can't be done. So they held it. There was many fights, many charges. Now, they did a maneuver, Joshua Chamberlain of the 20th Maine, when he ran out of ammo. But so did these men here, Alabama and Texas. These guys marched 20 miles that day to get to here. So you can imagine, in the heat of July, this is July 2, 90 degrees, wool uniform, all their equipment on, 20 miles in Pennsylvania weather. It was humid. It's not like, you know, humidity. Those men were done. They were spent. So they charged 3 times. The 3rd time, they tried to turn this corner. They came around. You can see a little hook there. They tried to turn that. What happened is, instead of the line of Maine, they were straight. They turned. They bent with that charge. So now the men are here. They're starting to spend. Well, now he came back. It looked like a gate and swung all those men off that hill and kept them away and captured many men of the Alabama regiment.
He had no ammo.
Pardon?
He had very little ammo.
He had hardly any ammo. But so did the South. They didn't have that much either.
Yeah.
They all kind of ran out. But he had high ground. He took, I guess they call it a chance, and said, let's go see if we can push him off this hill. And he did. He held that line because it was that important. So that's the story of that part of the battlefield. You got to remember, there's more fighting going on in here. Go on to the next. Now we have the peach orchard. Remember, General Sickle, he pushed his whole line off around top, went over to here, and McLaw's corps now, or divisions, came at him and pushed Sickles' divisions of Humphreys, Birney, Caldwell out of the peach orchard. They were in here. At this point, a ball hit Sickles' leg and took his leg off. It's in a museum somewhere. I'm not sure where, but they have his bones somewhere. He preserved them. Anyway, it's still around. So, they first initial assaults to push him off the peach orchard. Now, a peach orchard is a little bit of a rolling hill. It's not a, you'll look at it and say, well, that's it. You know, it's not a big deal. But it was just a little bit rise of ground. Terrain played a lot in the Civil War. So they got pushed off out of there, and they went into, through here, through another ridge here. Here's the wheat field. There was much fighting in here. There's much fighting in here. There's many monuments all in this area. If you ever get there, you'll see there's still this road. It's now paved. And there's monuments all through here. There was much fighting in there. Go ahead to the next one. Now you can see where they were. They got routed. They got pushed right off the peach orchard. They went through the wheat field. They went off another ridge, and they got pushed back, basically, right on here's Cemetery Ridge, right around here is your high top, and they got pushed back well into there. There were many casualties. There was, and they have Plum Run. Plum Run is just a stream. They call it Bloody Run. Just ran with blood. Many casualties there. Many stories, many monuments. But that's the route. That was another part of the battlefield, just lower. That's the wheat field. All this got pushed down, and here's Devil's Den. All that was a lot of fighting. Go on to the next one. Here's another area of that battlefield where I showed you. Peach Orchard was up in here. They got pushed through here to Round Top. And you can see all different regiments, Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Michigan. Many monuments. It's pretty neat to see. All this here, you see this here, that's artillery, but of course some of that got captured. When McLaws came through, he captured a lot of this artillery here. This house, Trossel House, is still there. In that house, there's a hole in the top gable where a cannonball went through, and it's still there today. Go on to the next one. This is the second phase. More, they came out of the peach orchard, got pushed right across into the round tops. Go ahead. This is what it looks like today. This is the wheat field. That's the peach orchard. That's it. They ran across this farm. This is Rose Woods. This is the wheat field. So you can see how they went from there and they got pushed right on through a route. And they were all in this area. And you can see some of the monuments. There's stories that you can read. Some monuments had them on there, but it's neat to see. Zook, that's one of the men. There's a man named Zook, and he has a story. And he has a his monument's right about in there. Go on to the next one, please. Okay, another part now. That was the southern end of the line. The northern end of the line, we had Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill. This started, the other southern end of the line battle was winding down. This one began in the evening. So basically, the whole first or the second day, there was hardly any fighting until late in the afternoon. Culp's Hill here, Cemetery Hill here, are they're hills. You can see that's the high point. This is also a cemetery in here. The South tried to take that hill again from Howard and were repulsed. There's a wall here. That wall is still there. There's a road that runs right back through here today and up and around. It was just trying to think of trying to storm up a hill and getting shot at, guys shooting down at you. It gets almost impossible unless you get overwhelming numbers. But it was a lot of fighting, and that was the other part of Lee's plan, to try both flanks. This is the other flank. Try to take over these hills. Now remember what I showed you before, they had inside lines. So the fighting down on the southern end of the line was dwindling down. Well, now they started filtering troops from the southern end of the line, interior, to get them up into these hills here, because when that fighting in the south started, they started putting reinforcements down south, taking them from these hills. Now you got the opposite effect. Now they're starting to fight up here. We'll bring the men up there. So that's kind of how they held the line. Go on to the next one. This is Cemetery Hill. That's Hancock. That's a statue of him. And something I gotta remember where this is now. I think right around in here, that's where the cemetery is, in that area. Go on to the next one. So this is Culp's Hill. This was in the evening. And this here is the lineup on the hill. Go on to the next one. Of the Union. This is what the South had to fight up to. Here's the Union line all up and down this hill, and that's there. A lot more woods today than what we see today. This is a pretty good depiction of what you would see, because they could see the line. If you look at the woods there today, you can't see through it. But it's many monuments going up there. Well, the South had to go up through here. Go ahead. They were repulsed. They got up to that hill, right, that last picture, and you can see they got repulsed and pushed back at the evening. That was Ewell. Go ahead. Now the battles of Cemetery Hill, which we had just before this one, you can see up a hill again, and here's the Union. This particular thing is the entrance to the cemetery. That's still there today. That same building. Go on to the next one, please. All right. So that's the end of the second day's fighting. And I'll try to get you the numbers. An estimate of the fighting was 10,000 Union, 6,800 Confederate casualties for the second day. They fought for approximately 6 hours. So you had casualties of 19,000 men. The Battle of Antietam was the one battle, was an all-day battle and had the most in one day. It was 23,000. This had 19 in 6 hours. They fought for 12 hours. So it shows you the ferocity of the fighting. Okay. Now we come to the third day, July 3rd. Lee wanted again to try against this flank, the northern flank, the right flank of the Union on Culp's Hill, which it failed the night before. He tried again in the morning, and now they had more troops because they could bring more troops up from the south and from the east to give them reinforcements, and therefore again it failed. So Lee said, I tried both flanks. He had a war council, and he said, because we tried both flanks, the center must be soft. We are going to fight against the center of the line. Next slide. So we have the famous Pickett's Charge. The center of the line saw some fighting, but not a lot. They had a lot of feints against it, but it was mostly the flanks. So Lee said, we're going to fight the center. So Pickett's Charge, they first started with artillery. And they had an artillery barrage between 150 and 170 guns spread out of the Confederate 2 miles. 2 miles along this line. And they were supposed to be used to soften up this line where the Union Army is. What happened was they fired for about 2 hours. Most of the shells landed out in here, not here. They couldn't see that. There was so much smoke from cannon fire. They can't see, but they thought, well, the Union gunners, they were firing back for a while. They quit firing. He was going to save his ammo for an attack which he knew was coming, General Hunt. So they thought, well, we got them softened up. So after about 2 hours, they quit. The lines came out. Pettigrew, Pickett, Anderson, Trimble. It was about 15,000 men. 12,500 to 15,000 men stood in a line 1 mile long to go to the center. This angle is called the angle. You can see why, rock wall. Right here is called the copse of trees. It's very famous. It's very big. It wasn't. But that's there. It's like everything is bare except for those trees, and that's what they aim for. Go on to the next line. So during the standoff, they came. Here you can see where the artillery was. They went to the center, and they were repulsed. Pettigrew's division, Garnett, Kemper, Armistead. Everyone maybe knows about him. He was the general who had his hat on a sword, follow me, got all the way up to the cannon, and was cut down, mortally wounded. Just on the other side of that was Hancock. That was his buddy, but he didn't know that. So it was repulsed, very bad. Go ahead to the next one. This is what it looks like today. This is that wall. Right around here is the angle, somewhere in there. This is where the line came from. These fields are basically unchanged. Neither is the fence line. They kept that. So these men had to go over that field, over the fence, all this time by artillery shooting, and just making, lack of a better term, gaping holes, but mincemeat. They got shot up bad. They had to come across that field. Go ahead.
Wasn't Lee set up back there watching this?
Okay, there's a statue of Lee right there. See that white? That's a statue of Lee. It's a southern monument. He's there. Yeah, he could have been in that area. He's probably going up, and there's a road back here and trails. He was probably going all up and down here, but that's where they put his monument, but that's there today. Yep, go ahead. Same, but a little bit different. That was probably where Lee was, came across that same field. This was the high point of the Confederate Army fighting the Union. This is the furthest north they got in their fighting, and they were repulsed. This field here, from there to there, is about a mile, maybe a mile and a half in some areas, but that's still there today. It's pretty neat to see. So that was the end. They all retreated. They stayed in these woods, bivouacked there for the night, waiting for another attack by the Union. They thought, well, we got repulsed. The Union is going to come charging into our lines. Normally that's what happens. But Meade didn't do that. So we have the aftermath. At the end of this battle, the third day, the Union lost about 1,500 men. The Confederates, Pickett's division alone suffered 2,600, Pettigrew 2,700, Trimble 855, Wilcox's brigade lost half. He had 400, lost 200 out of that. So the total losses in that attack were 6,500, 6,600 to the Union's 15. It was quite costly. There's many stories written. You can read a lot. Trimble lost a leg. In Pickett's division alone, there were 26 of 40 field grade officers lost. Decimated that division. It was never the same again. That was the high water mark. So, as you can see, it was quite costly and it stopped the Union. Now we had a couple aftermaths. Go on to the next one. We have two parts of the field that we didn't talk about. Jeb Stuart showed up late on the second day and was on the east side of the battlefield, and he tried to get through and break through to the Union's rear. Didn't do that. Now this was fought to a standstill. There was this cavalry, and that field was there, protected. A name you might recognize is Fitz Lee. It's relative to General Lee. Another name you might recognize is Custer. Custer was there, and he fought there. Go on to the next one. On the southern part of the cavalry, there was also fighting, which is preserved. There was very short skirmishes, and that was the end of the Battle of Gettysburg. 3 days of fighting. The two armies suffered between 46 and 51,000 casualties in 3 days of fighting. Union casualties, 23,000, 55 men. Confederate, about 28,000. You have to remember that was a third of Lee's general officers were killed or wounded, captured. 1/3. It kind of wrecked his army. It was never the same again. So the total of the whole campaign for both sides was 57,225 men. A lot of casualties.
Ari, does that include the men that died later because of wounds inflicted at Gettysburg?
Well, they don't. The statistics they put together is killed, wounded, or captured.
Okay.
So they would be wounded. If they died later, they go onto the killed list.
Okay.
It's still a casualty. So you can imagine after all this, 3 days of fierce fighting and battle, what the town of Gettysburg looked like. It was a mess. Small town. Just think there was 8,000 dead bodies lying all over the place in a hot July sun. People were sick, literally retching. They didn't know what to do. They had to bury them quick. There's also horses, 3,000, 3,500 horses dead, mutilated all over the field. Think about that. Total devastation. So that was the Battle of Gettysburg. There was one civilian casualty. Her name was Jenny Wade. She was baking bread in her kitchen and a ball came through a door, struck her and killed her. She's buried in that cemetery there. In November, everyone is sure aware that Lincoln came to that battlefield, dedicated a cemetery, and said the Gettysburg Address. So that is the story of Gettysburg, quickly and in a nutshell. There's many stories there. It's a great place to see. Most of it is preserved. Many stories. The roadway that runs around it, there's a roadway that runs all the way around is about 30 miles long. And all kinds of places to see, stop, walk, trails. The town of Gettysburg is pretty well preserved. There are your modern things, the roads are paved and all, but there's some original buildings there. And some places you can stay in those buildings, bed and breakfast that were originally there from that era. To the west, there's a very famous painting of when Lee went past Cashtown, I guess his tavern. That building is still there yet. You can see that, Civil War era. Still a tavern. So that's the story of Gettysburg. Any questions, comments? At the end of the battle, they sat for a day. Go on to the next one. Lee had a retreat. He retreated back into Virginia. It took them 2 weeks. The North pursued after him, not greatly. They had a few battles, skirmishes. You got to remember, Meade's army was pretty well beat up also. He didn't have the stomach for it, he didn't do it. That's it.
Thank you, Bob. If you, like he says, if you ever do get a chance to go out there to Gettysburg and see the grounds, it's awesome to see. I've been there. There is